Okay, I think we're ready to start.
Yeah, so we'll just start with 5 minutes of sitting meditation. Um, and Ina will ring a digital gong to begin and a digital gong to end. So without further ado, although do we give people another minute to arrive or? Oh, now there goes that minute, I think. Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good late at night to all 291 of you out there in digital land. So once again, we'll have a talk in this series of videos from 1975 on the Sadhana of Mahamudra. In general, I'd just like to let the talk speak for itself, literally. But I will say a few words by way of introduction. So the Vidyadhara in general didn't give his talks, his individual talks, titles. The titles were applied after the fact as a reference point. But I thought I would say a little bit about the where this talk fits into the picture of things. So it's been given the title Crazy Wisdom, and that's, as the Vidyadhara will discuss, that's a form of uncompromising wisdom and compassion at the ultimate level. So this word crazy is an English translation that captures the meaning, the original meaning partially, but it also can be misleading, as we'll, and he will delve into that. And the other main aspect of the talk is that we'll be introduced toward the end to the lineage figures within the sadhana who we call out to and who embody that uncompromising form of wisdom and compassion. At a certain level of engagement with the Dharma, being polite to ego is no longer applicable. So the sadhana becomes a vehicle to connect with not a distant past, but the living power of this transmission of this form of wisdom and compassion that comes to us through the lineages and through our practice. So it's not something external, but something that can be transmitted and in the moment, on the spot, and appreciated and embodied now. So, speaking of now, without further ado, let's start the talk.
Well, I would like to continue again from last night's talk discussion, that at this point we discussed the three levels of teacher and their particular relationship involved in terms of students' role in practice, their development. But at the same time, I would like to relate with some sense of to whom they're relating to, particularly in this sadhana, that there is a sense of somewhat relating with ideal ethereal beings who are known as Dorje Drollo or Pakshi. People who already exist and they died and they lived in the past. And how can we relate that as the present situation? What is different from that in worshiping Jesus Christ, for that matter? Such question could be an interesting one, but at this point, when we talk about Dorje Drollo or Pakshi, all those teachers seem to be largely based on a basic notion of embodiment of the siddhas, which means, siddha is a Sanskrit word which means those who have able to overpower phenomena world in their own enlightened way. Or else we could say the crazy wisdom person, which is a direct translation from the Tibetan, what's known as Yeshe Chölwa. Yeshe meaning wisdom, Chölwa is gone wild. That the closest translation that we came up with, crazy, which somehow makes further understanding in some sense that in this case crazy goes along with the wisdom, works much closer. So in this case, it's a craziness gone wisdom, rather than the wisdom gone crazy. So actually it should be from their point of view that the craziness is related with wisdom. So the notion of wisdom here is a very touchy subject, and we have to get into some kind of technical aspect of the whole thing. And the notion of wisdom is a Sanskrit word of jnana, Tibetan word of yeshe, which means the perception or enlightenment which exists eternally. Ye meaning primordial, she means knowing. Knowing primordially, knowing already. So that seems to be the basic point, that idea is that you haven't just acquired knowledge suddenly, somebody told you so, therefore you just acquired reasoning, but knowledge which exists already there, that we are beginning to tune into that situation. So that is a real idea of that actually that such thing does exist already, rather than such things are purely manufactured by scholars and the books and the scientists and so forth that we have usually. So in this case, the notion of enlightenment is the same as the wisdom in that sense, that we believe that being Buddha is not so much a being great scholar, he knows everything all about it, therefore he is enlightened. But being Buddha or enlightened is because there's someone who is actually able to tune his or her mind into that particular state of being which already exists, which already liberated long time ago. The problem existing in us was that, or is that we have covered with all kinds of hidings and shutters and Venetian blinds, whatever we have with us. We're trying to cover it up, so that consequently we are known as confused people, which is insult in some sense, that we are not all that confused and stupid, bewildered as we should be, but somewhat that we have possibilities, more than possibilities, that actually we inherit the fundamental wakefulness all the time. So that's the notion of enlightenment as well as the notion of Yeshe, that eternally wake, primordially wake, primordially cognitively open and insightful at the same time. That's the notion of wisdom. In terms of crazy, it seems to be a different aspect, and that is related with somewhat dealing with individual situations. When the wisdom is achieved complete in its fullest level, thoroughly, fully, then it has to relate with something or other. It has to relate with its own radiation, its own light. When the light begins to shine, it reflects on things, usually. That's how we tell whether light is bright or dim, is whether the thing reflecting on it is bright or dim, or if it reflects on the eyes, we could see this light is bright because I see it. Otherwise, we have no way of telling whether the light is bright or dim. So since light is so bright and brilliant, reflects on the things properly and fully and very brilliantly, so that we have some chance of knowing that there is some kind of communication is taking place in order to express the intensity of that particular wisdom light shining through. When that particular wisdom is beginning to shine through and begin to project on things, that we have some communications taking place. And that particular communication is traditionally what's known as Buddha activity. Or synonym for that is compassion. And in this case, compassion not so much of feeling sorry for somebody, that you are in a better place and somebody is in the worst place. But in this case, compassion is a sense of warmth, a sense of not having any hesitations to reflect on things, reflect on objects, your light. It's not hesitating on reflecting on the things. So that seems to be automatic and natural process, organic process that's taking place in that case. So since the light has no hesitation, has no particular inhibition to reflect on the things. The light does not discriminate whether it's reflecting on a pile of shit or a pile of rock or a pile of a diamond. Whatever. It reflects on everything that is available there, which is facing towards that light, which is precisely the relationship of student and teacher action takes. Is that when the student is facing in the right directions, right level, then light is reflected as Guru Buddha, enlightened Guru, enlightened teacher, reflects on it. It reflects on its surface. And when some kind of dark corners there that you have no receptivity anymore, that the light doesn't reach there, but light does not particularly try to fight or convert into other areas necessarily so. So that non-hesitated light that reflects choicelessly all the time, shining through brilliantly, constantly on objects, are the definition of craziness, or craziness in a sense of non-discriminating and not having any kind of cowardice attitude, paranoid attitude should I shine on this, although this particular object is facing on me, towards me? Not at all, none whatsoever. So whoever it is need to be subjugated is subjugated, and whoever need to be, whatever goes, the line goes. Anybody think about the line? Maybe somebody can read that particular line in the sadhana microphone. Somebody else, do you want to read? Yeah, over there, yeah.
I think it's he destroys what needs to be destroyed, and he cares for whatever needs his care. He subdues what needs to be subdued.
Thank you. That'll do. So that seems to be the definition of actually crazy wisdom is whatever is needed will be done. What is not needed to be is not particularly done. So that seems to be the idea, different from that of the Christian concept of that everybody should be converted into Christianity, including the stones and the grasses and the meat eaters and everybody, into Christ principle, that it is our duty to go around a corner and to convert. But in this case, it's a different kind of approach. It's whatever's need to be reflected on it, it's reflected on it. Whatever's need to be done is done because of what is needed there on that particular spot. So that seems to be the fundamental basic idea of even it doesn't seem to be particularly crazy from your point of view, maybe. But you think if somebody's crazy, will just won't leave you any space, and just all over you and roll over you, vomit all over you, and diarrhea all over you, and just make you terribly crazy, extend that craziness. But in this case, it's somewhat not as neurotic as that, but it's just basic craziness, which is fearlessness, in other words, and not giving up anything. Not giving up anything seems to be the basic point. At the same time, willing to work with what is there on the basis of primordial wakeful quality. So that seems to be the definition of crazy wisdom, or sometimes known as wisdom gone wild. And that particular concept has also a lot of things to do with not only the object reflecting on it alone, but it has a lot of things to do with the space around it as well at the same time. That the crazy wisdom person provides immense space, environment rather. That particular environment is completely thronged with that kind of charge of its wisdom, fearless wisdom, that actually if you need to liberate somebody, liberate to work with somebody, that person is actually become choicelessly become a victim of it. That you have no way to run away. Because if you try to run backward, that space is also covered already. If you try to run forward, that space is also already covered. So the notion of a sense of choicelessness of this particular person that you relate with becomes very natural and open. At the same time, somewhat dictatorial, shall we say, that space is already thronged and filled with such charge of heavy enlightenment, having primordial sanity. And that seems to be our problem usually, that we can't handle too much sanity. And we would like to have a little corner of neurosis somewhere, even in our pockets, just a little puff here and there. So if you find too much sanity, you say, boy, it was heavy. That's basically what sadhana is all about, is to create that such claustrophobic sanity, enlightenment to the atmosphere, to this world. North America particularly this time is concentrating, or at least the Western Europe is somewhat hopeful, apart from England. However, that's probably a joke. Well, the idea is that the practitioner of this particular sadhana has that kind of understanding, and committing oneself to such intense experience, which is usually called freaking. But then let's dissect the notion of freakiness. What do we mean by freaking? It has two aspects. When sane people get into insane situations, they will say it is freaky and insane. But when insane people get into too much sanity situations, also it's known as freaky as well, to the other way around. So that word freaky doesn't mean anything very much. It's just common jargon that we usually use. In other words, that we don't like such situations that we want to get in, that we find that is threatening to us, whatever is right or wrong or sane or insane, that we would like to actually demonstrate or indulge in our own thinking, which is not allowed in that particular situation. So that seems to be one of the interesting situations of this particular approach of crazy wisdom, actually charging and developing its own directions towards us, sense of openness, and a sense of confusion at the same time. Another word that interesting point about is that we have lots of fear about complete sanity. Let us face it, that we don't like completely being sane, completely being awakened. We really ourselves, that we in ourselves, as well as we can invite somebody else to indulge in ourselves together in group wise. Life take a break here. That's usually the worst case, that really be full.
Sorry about that, Fox. Let's see if Elroy can return to us. And If not, I will share my screen. Elroy, I think we don't have sound now. Can you please reshare the screen with the sound on? It seems like your connection is not stable.
Another word
Yeah.
that interesting point out is that we have lots of fear about complete sanity.
I think it's breaking. Elroy, can you hear me?
Insane.
Okay. Let's see what we can. Elroy, I think your connection is not stable and it's breaking. So let me try to share my screen. Okay. Oh, well, I will take it as a yes. Give me a few minutes, please. I think it's time for our meditation.
Into insane situations, they would say it is freaky and insane. But when insane people get into too much sanity situations, also it's known as freaky as well, to the other way around. So that word freaky doesn't mean anything very much. It's just common jargon that we usually use. Another word that we don't like such situations that we want to get in, that we find that is threatening to us, whatever is right or wrong or sane or insane, that we would like to actually demonstrate or indulge in our own thinking, which is not allowed in that particular situation. So that seems to be one of the interesting situations of this particular approach of crazy wisdom, actually charging and developing its own directions towards us, sense of openness, and a sense of confusion at the same time. Another word that interesting point about is that we have lots of fear about complete sanity. Let us face it. That we don't like completely being sane, completely being awakened. We really don't. That we would like to have a little home touch. In this level, that level, all kinds of levels. Home touch that we can indulge in ourselves, home touch that we can indulge in ourselves, as well as we can invite somebody else to indulge in ourselves together in a group wise. But we would like to take a break here and there. That's usually always the case, that we don't want to really be fully sane. But at the same time, we have no idea how to be fully sane, fully balanced, fully awake. We have no idea, we have never done so. And occasionally when we feel good and religious and prayerful, we would like to go up to our loft. But at the same time, the basement is more attractive. That we actually find there's more reference point and learning situations will take place if there's some kind of indulgence in the neurosis, at the same time we're doing our good job on the other side, which is a level of wakefulness. Sometimes we find quite heroically being sane for a long time, if there's such thing as also possible at all, coming back home, returning to your previous situations, that it is more refreshing to see things are so-called gut level, and dirty spoon level, greasy spoon level. There's some kind of love, neurotic love, that is involved with the our ethnic claustrophobia is always there. That doesn't only apply to the Jews or the Chinese or the Italians, I learned, but that applies to everybody's ethnic, their little world at the same time. Their grandmother's cookies, and the temper tantrums of one's own mother, and the business-like approaches of one's own father. All those things, little things that makes us comfortable to return home, is sometimes very nostalgic. That we feel that we would like to return home. And to feel those good old things. Maybe that's why the antique furniture is very expensive in America. Particularly Vajrayana's approach to reality, as far as it's concerned, it's demanding complete sanity. not being feared of it, just completely demanding highways and highways and highways of sanity, skies and skies and skies, fold after fold of sanity, and not be afraid of that. We talked about the blue pancakes last year in Naropa Institute's Tantra session, which is also a similar kind of approach. This disc is not so much a pancake as a round one, but its whole sky is self-existing dough after dough, roll after roll of pancake type space that is always there. The crazy wisdom vision is very crazy too. It also gives a sense of a direction, and a sense of heroism, a sense of reality, and a sense of consideration, compassion, and so forth down the line. And including the doubts are also part of that particular crescendo. So the crazy wisdom body is related with basic notion of enlightenment. As we say in the writing to the crazy wisdom form of the Buddhas in the past and the present and the future, I think it goes something like that. Is it true? Yeah. So it's part of the general scheme of enlightenment, rather than some Rasputin of Buddhism got wild and he created little his crazy things, and the crazy wisdom cult is churned out. Padmasambhava went to Tibet and he got drunk and he got crazy being in Tibet and hyperventilated in his mountain air coming from India. Or Pakshi went to China and he got turned on by being an imperial teacher, therefore he got crazy. But in this case, we are talking about a larger form of crazy wisdom, which is a cosmic crazy wisdom, that it is a part of the enlightened attitude of the whole thing, which is already crazy, continuously crazy, and wise at the same time. Primordial wisdom takes place continuously, which is also a very crazy thing to happen, in some sense. So we have two characters in the two particular type of personalities in the sadhana itself. Dorje Drollo, Karmapas. Dorje Drollo is being Padmasambhava, early Indian Buddhist saint, Siddha, Vidyadhara, great teacher, who had come to Tibet, and he attained his enlightenment from his birth. And he brought Buddhism to Tibet, the initial Buddhism to Tibet. Earlier than that, there was some element of Buddhism brought to Tibet, but he actually brought the full swung of Buddhism, full force of Buddhism into Tibet, established Buddhism in Tibet. And he manifested himself as a crazy wisdom person, particularly when he was meditating in Tibet, in a cave called Taksang Singha Samdrup, which is now in Bhutan. In those days, the Bhutan is part of Tibet. In the province of Man, as known as, in order to relate with the savageness of the Tibetans and their own little ethnic samurai mentality, that he actually had to meet with such people, had to teach people that way. So he manifests himself into enlightened samurai, savage person, which is known as Dorje Drollo. Crazy wisdom person. And iconographically, he rides on a pregnant tigress, and he wears the robes of a bhikshu, Buddhist monk, and he wears a garment, a kimono type garment underneath, and he holds vajra in his hand, like this one, and he holds a three-pronged, three-bladed dagger in his left hand. But he is actually representing the aspect which that such crazy wisdom notion doesn't have to be related with, particularly notion of gentleness in order to tame somebody. In order to tame somebody, you can approach abruptly, directly, and just to connect with their own neurosis, insanity, and they project sanity on the spot. That's the notion of crazy wisdom. Pakshi, on the other hand, who is a second Karmapa, who is the head of the Kagyu tradition at this point, the 16th Karmapa now, who is head of the Kagyu tradition, and the Karmapa is the founder of a Kagyu, Karma Kagyu school of particular lineage, which we have belonged to, and the practicing lineage. And he was brought to China when he was as a great master, accompanied by the existing Dalai Lama. Those days, which was Sakya people, they are not known as the Dalai Lama, but another abbot, another Lama, who was the head of Tibetan country, Tibetan kingdom. And Pakshi went, accompanied such person to China as part of the entourage, and Pakshi was all along very strange, that not in keeping with the protocols of that particular emissary that are going to China, that this particular abbot of Sakya teacher is going to become the Chinese imperial teacher. Pakshi went along, he played a lot of little tricks on that journey, and everybody is somewhat concerned about his power and his naughtiness, so to speak. That the imperial court, certain point, there's some kind of intrigue took place that the abbot of the teacher didn't like Pakshi playing his tricks, that he'd be thrown into jail. And by miraculous power, that the Pakshi decided to turn his prison into a palace. And he was able to manifest himself as a real crazy wisdom person. There's no politeness or diplomacy is necessary in order to convert a Chinese emperor. Those days, the Mongolian Chinese emperor. That straight talk, so to speak, is important, more necessary than just purely trying to convert somebody by gentle talk and going through. Buddhism is going to be good for your imperial health. And the Karmapas wasn't into it, so the rest of the party got very upset, and they were thinking that he might blow the whole trip, so to speak. And apparently he did. And he became the real imperial teacher towards the end. And there's a particular quotation or remark by the Chinese emperor by saying, the guru is great, but how about that second guru with the bearded person? How about him? He seemed to be a very threatening person. That was a particular remark that the Chinese emperor made. Interestingly, a crazy wisdom situation took place continuously in the Karmapas, who was a unreasonable person all the time, all along. Getting back to Tibet, that his monastery was not very much built, but he ordered to build on an emergency basis. And so Tsilpu Monastery was founded. That's the seat of his holiness Karmapa now was in Tibet. So it is an interesting kind of thing that such a situation goes on through the whole lineage process. In fact, if I may just inject a little bit of our own vision, connect with that as well. It's like that we want to buy this particular building, which is beyond question in some sense, or it's possibility on the other hand, but we are going to do it. That seemed to be the Karmapas's vision, actually, that he would have done a similar thing. That if we're going to come up with a fantastic rich person, come along, and everybody, all of us trying to be nice to this particular guy or this particular lady, and we might blow his trip completely, to the extent that he becomes completely switched. That is, a notion of sanity is the wrong level. That he might become a great student if they're willing to take such a chance. And that's a very interesting point, actually. So far we haven't found such person who is rich and crazy enough, and also encouraging enough to do such thing. But that's how Karmapas plays a role to Emperor of China. The interesting point about the Karmapas is that he's known for his abruptness and his dedication. But I was saying that is in intelligence and primordial wakefulness, of course. Then we have another interesting person in the sadhana, which is Tism Kempa, who is first Karmapa before Pakshi, who's extraordinarily solid person, basically extraordinarily solid and sane and contemplative oriented. He did nothing but in his life teaching and negotiating a lot of fractions that took place, and a lot of chaos took place between all kinds of squabbles of different principalities in Tibet, and their fights were finally subjugated or calmed down by his particular presence, his particular effort that we made. He's basically a peacemaker person and a very powerfully contemplative type person. Then we have Mikya Dorje, who is the 8th Karmapa, who is a scholar, great teacher, and at the same time he's also very wild in his approach to reality. That he says once, he said that if I can burn, if I can light fire to the rest of the cosmos, I will do so. That kind of a burning prajna is taking place all the time. As far as Rangjung Dorje is concerned, he is the very key person who actually brought together the higher and the lower tantra together, and an extraordinarily spacious person, and he is one of the foremost powerful exponent of the Mahamudra, which is a higher level of Vajrayana enlightenment experience, as well as he's a great exponent on Adi teachings as well at the same time. Well, these are I'm trying to introduce these people to you tonight, and I'm sure they are very pleased to meet you as well. And interesting point is that working with them, such powerful people, such a powerful idea, and such a powerful idea which is not a past or the present or the future, but it is simply living experience in every level. That all of those ideas exist presently, also exist in the past, obviously. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to discuss them. Since such experience did exist, it does exist, that we have some way of relating with it, that kind of capturing their particular vision, their particular fearlessness. How are we going to do that? And the only way to do that seems to be to just to have some kind of connection, means, ways, of course. That means, ways is the sadhana itself to link together. I'm not particularly talking about it, tripping out and taking LSD and reading the sadhana in the afternoon and trying to visualize them, trying to come them into your particular moment, or when you're particularly highly depressed or highly needing help, get them into your particular side. It's not so much as ordinary popular Christian principle of that, trying to invite God on your side, that your side is right. That's precisely the problem that we're having with the Arabs and the Israelis. But in this case, we are not trying to fight. So nobody has to be on particularly your side either, or the other person's side. There's no other person to fight with. So we are on our side. These are there. And these are not regarded as a ghost, Holy Ghost. These are not particularly regarded as Christ principle. These are not particularly regarded as spirits, that is Elijah, or whatever you have around you. But these are regarded as simply state of being that expresses ourselves in our awakened state of being. Thank you. Questions are welcome.
So before I make some remarks, why don't we just take 2 minutes to sit? And if necessary, if you need to use the washroom or something, you can take that opportunity now. No gong or anything. I'll just look after the 2 minutes. Okay, we're back. So I want to say a little bit before getting into some of the things that Vidyadhara talked about there. I want to say a little bit about what it is we're studying, the Sadhana of Mahamudra, because it relates to what he gets into at the end of the talk. So it's called the Sadhana of Mahamudra because the Mahamudra is a tradition of meditation and meditative realization at a very subtle level. And the sadhana also is about another related meditative tradition, Mahā'ati. So Mahā'ati is also called, generally called Dzogchen, or you could say great perfection, the great perfection. And Mahamudra means the great seal, that all of reality is sealed with wakefulness, you could say. So the idea of the sadhana is not that we chant and engage with these principles and these figures of the lineage and snap our fingers and have sudden enlightenment as if we were pulling a light switch. But it's based on intense dedication to meditation practice. And it emerges from that. So we always have to understand that as the background here when we're talking about these fantastical things. These figures of the lineage are people who practice incredible amounts of meditation. And, we're following in their footsteps. And I know that a number of people here have done the Datun practice. So that's the background that we're coming out of. So in the first talk, the Vidyadhara talked about the elder, the Kalyana Mitra. So the elder being the teacher who guides us very gently and reasonably and logically along the path of meditation, and the Kalyana Mitra at the level of Mahayana is our friend, minding our business a little bit more, getting into our thingies a little bit more than the elder. And then, of course, finally, at the level of the guru. And all of these aspects of the teacher and the lineage apply at whatever stage we're operating at. So this, what's discussed here in this talk about crazy wisdom, as he says, it translates Tibetan Yeshe Chölwa, Yeshe meaning wisdom, primordial wakefulness, you could say, which is not just an intellectual attainment or capability, but it's a complete state of being, and it's pre-existing, kind of pre-existing knowledge, he says. He also talks about it frequently as sanity. This was a kind of a coinage of the Vidyadhara to talk about wakefulness, enlightenment, non-ego as the ultimate form of sanity. identifying what we may regard conventionally as normal way of thinking in life, ego-oriented, as somewhat sane, and pointing out that our constant ego orientation of seeing, perceiving, and filtering everything through the lens of a phenomenon that tries to imagine that things are permanent and secure and owned by us. That's insane. Sanity is the opposite of that. It's non-ego, complete, awake, and completely transcending the very deep habit of putting ourselves at the center and self-cherishing. So this is where crazy wisdom comes in. And, the word, since it got translated, yet since Yeshe Chölwa got translated as crazy wisdom, it's kicked around and taken on a life of its own. And there's a lot of kind of wrong understanding about it that also is kicking around. As he says in the talk, it's not like a teacher becomes a Rasputin, like crazy figure as some kind of tactic. But the craziness really comes from the point of view of ego. So the guru operates from the perspective of non-ego, which from the point of view of ego is crazy. It's very threatening to have activity that's not based on deep habit patterns of self-centeredness and filtering everything through that kind of reference point. So he uses the analogy of a light shining. So it just shines on whatever it encounters. So well, as he has somebody read from the Sadhana. He is inseparable from peacefulness, and yet he acts whenever action is required. He subdues what needs to be subdued. He destroys what needs to be destroyed, and he cares for whatever needs his care. So this is the activity of Yeshe Chölwa. It's this non-discriminating, as he says, light that shines on everything without cowardice. He describes it as a kind of brilliant light. It's Buddha activity, which could also be said to be compassion. And it's natural and organic, not contrived or strategized or cooked up. So it has this quality that he talked about that one of the main figures in the sadhana particularly demonstrated, Pakshi, this quality of abruptness, directness, and why that's important at this kind of level of engagement with the Dharma, where we're willing to put ourselves in front of and in the way of this kind of tradition, is that if everything is only gradual and reasonable, it can be exploited by ego. In the sense that when you have when you perceive a gradual path of getting better and better and more realized and becoming a better person, behind the scenes, ego looks at that and says, oh, yeah, I like this. I can get a hold of this. This is good. Yeah, I know how to do this. We're going to get better and better. And you end up creating a spiritual ego. It becomes a form of subtly building up ego in the guise of progressive movement towards awake and toward sanity. The abrupt quality can undercut that. And when we get into practicing the sadhana and read its words, you can feel that kind of abrupt quality of being uncompromising. And as he talked about, straight talk. So not soft selling the Dharma. When Pakshi traveled to China for to meet with the Mongol emperor, along with the Dalai Lama, essentially, the emperor picked up on the fact that, this is a very abrupt and threatening person. And that was intriguing to him. It can, we actually come to appreciate that kind of directness because it's so honest. It's honest about habitual pattern, about ego. So before we have a little bit of discussion, I want to say something briefly about these various characters he describes. So he talks about first Karmapa, Dusum Khenpa, and his teacher is Kempopa, whose teacher was Milarepa. So what's significant about him is that, among other things, is that he saw the importance of carrying on the tradition, the meditative tradition of Mahamudra, but there were lots of threats to it. There was always in Tibet powerful forces, political forces, forces of the aristocracy who wanted to take over the monasteries, essentially. And because they were, in the Tibetan world, they were big, important institutions. Dusum Khenpa saw that in order to preserve the real tradition of Mahamudra, he needed to take certain steps. So he came up with the idea of incarnating and having his incarnation recognized. And that's who Karmapakshi is. Karmapakshi, the second Karmapa, is the first tulku, the first incarnated being who is recognized as being the continuation of a particular kind of lineage. So it was a choice made about how to carry on the lineage. Other lineages have made other choices about how to carry it on through heredity and other means, but we won't get into that. So within the sadhana, you have this figure of Tusum Khenpa, the first Karmapa, who did something very bold in order to preserve the the Mahamudra tradition so that it could be carried on. And we could say that was a successful move because the Mahamudra tradition is alive today. Karma Pakshi was a much more wild person, and then, other figures in the sadhana include the third Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje, who was instrumental in bringing together the streams of the Mahamudra tradition and the Mahāti tradition. So he was, a great scholar. And then there was the eighth Karmapa, Mikyo Dorje, who was also an incredible scholar and practitioner. And the main figure in the sadhana is a form of Padmasambhava, which the Mahāti tradition traces its beginnings to. So we are, in doing the sadhana, connecting with that particular lineage power as it is carried on today. So I think without further ado, we could have some questions and discussion. Okay, Nadia?
Hi. Could you tell more about, at the end, he says, hi, so I'm Nadia Baribeau from Quebec.
Oh, hello.
And I met you before in DDL. You did
nice.
a weekend on the Sadhana.
Oh my God, that's a long time ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he says, like those characters are not regarded as ghosts, but they are regarded as state of being that expresses. But he says like they should be seen. What I understand, and I want to know if it's right. He says that they are state of beings that are like in us that can express as themselves like as needed, like as required. This is what I understand. Am I right?
Yes, it is subtle and nuanced, but yes, you're right. So some other kinds of examples we might think of is about how the spirit of a particular person or tradition is carried into the present day. Let's say the spirit of Gandhi, for example. So you have some understanding of who Gandhi is, and there's a tradition, and in imagining Gandhi, you might try to embody his activity in the current time. So in the case of these lineage figures, the lineage is actually intact. So there is a context within which we can connect with that power so that it's something coming from within inside us rather than We think, okay, these people lived a long time ago, and it's kind of like a history story, or maybe we think of them as floating around in the sky and they're going to save us. It's more this quality of entering into the context of this kind of meditation practice. That's key, the meditation practice. And then our own longings and aspirations and further understanding allow us to connect with the primordial state of being that they represent. Does that make some sense?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ilya, I can't, it's like LLAA, what's coming across for me. So
It's Ila.
Ila.
Yes.
Right.
I'm from Germany.
Okay.
I ordered the
Okay. They
sadhana.
just sent it to you, huh?
Yeah, they sent it. This was very fast. I was so pleased by this. But in the last session, you said we should practice in a group. We should not practice by ourselves. So I need to say, I feel a little shy even reading it. So please help me with this.
Okay. This is an excellent question. I also see that there's a question in the chat that I suppose that I will relate to in a minute. So some guidelines around the sadhana. You can definitely read it, and use it as something to study in the context of this course. It is generally intended as a group practice. Now, if you've made a strong relationship with it over a long period of time, then it would be regarded as acceptable to practice it by yourself, but that generally it is a group practice. So and you can find opportunities to practice it online with other people through Ocean, for example. Does that address your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Barry. Thank you so much.
All right, I want to address this question in the chat. I'm not going to deal with questions like how you get the sadhana through customs, and yeah, that's not my area.
Do you want me to read it, Barry? There are like two questions about the people not understanding the notion of crazy wisdom at all.
Yeah.
And they ask you to give more examples and just connect this to the reality.
Yes. So, yes, the questions have to do with, wow, what the hell is he talking about? I have no idea. Crazy wisdom. I don't. So I sympathize with that for sure. The Vidyadhara had a way of communicating, partially having to do with he, was still learning English. Partially to do with the fact that these are extremely subtle notions. So to try to simplify, just focusing on this notion of Yeshe Chölwa, it looks like we're going to go over a little bit, and I apologize. We had a little technical glitch there, which took up some time, but so we'll go over maybe 10 minutes or so. My apologies. So let's first of all focus on the wisdom part. We'll take it in two parts. So we're talking about a kind of wisdom that is the complete realization of non-ego, the Buddha's enlightenment. That's what this level of wisdom is about. So that's the wisdom part. The Chölwa part relates to the activity of this wisdom when ordinary ego-oriented people encounter that wisdom. And it is threatening to our ego orientation, because it's basically not just saying in some kind of reasonable, logical way, ego doesn't exist. It's I'm going to use a very bad word here, it's a fuck you to ego. It's just at the primordial level, you're not even in the picture. Get the hell out of here. That, from ego's point of view, is perceived as wild, or we could say crazy. That is the kind of activity that we're talking about of these gurus and of the ultimate level of the Vajrayana tradition. However, the level of the reasonable form of Buddhism, the gradual form of Buddhism, the form of Buddhism of the elder and the spiritual friend are extremely important and are the background of all of this that makes it possible for there to be a context where we could be exposed to this kind of uncompromising compassion and have it be beneficial. If we don't have that kind of context, it could be actually very unbeneficial. So it's very important, I keep emphasizing, that the sitting practice of meditation and all of basic Buddhism and Mahayana are extremely important as a foundation for any of this to have any workability and power. The context is extremely important. So I hope that was helpful. Looks like Barbara. Go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you, Barry. That explanation was quite great. There is something that Chunkra said that I would like you to explain a little bit more, when he referred to the sadhana saying it destroys what needs to be destroyed, subdues what needs to be subdued, cares for what needs to be cared. It's fearless and doesn't give up anything. It not only shines on the object, but it also shines on the space. What is meant by that? And the second question is, if you're a Dzogchen practitioner, which I am, should we not practice this sadhana?
Oh, no, well, let's take the last one first. No, Dzogchen is completely applicable here. This is the Sadhana Mahamudra could be called the Sadhana Mahamudra and Mahāti, or because it's very much about the interplay between these traditions, that they're not really ultimately ranked.
Okay.
And that as he says in other talks about the sadhana that are in the book, the merging of these traditions in the context of the sadhana could be described as bringing together insight and emotion. He associates emotion with Mahamudra and insight with Mahāti. So he says, and conventionally speaking, our emotion could stand to be more insightful, and our insight could stand to have more emotion.
Okay.
So they're a perfect marriage. So in terms of, I think your first question was about the light shining on both the object and the environment.
And the space around, yes.
Space around it. Yeah, well,
Yes.
that's a very subtle thing, is what I picked up from it, from, reading that and over the years and listening to this talk, in my own understanding, it's that the activity of the guru is not like a personal interaction in a sense. It's a phenomenal interaction. And that's why it's possible that the phenomenal world can operate as a teacher at that level if you have that kind of context. So the light coming from the guru, or the activity of the guru, covers the whole space. So there's a certain kind of context that's so intense, it's claustrophobic and complete. Ego perceives that claustrophobia as lacking the kind of oxygen it wants. Awake perceives it as the awakened mind. And that flip can take place. Does that make any sense?
So when it's directed at the activity and it permeates the space, does that mean that it reverberates out and it's not just affecting the activity, it's affecting the entire context
I think
environment?
it reverberates out and comes back.
That.
That and the fact that it's in the space can take you by surprise in a sense, right?
I understand. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Well, maybe one more. I don't like to. Let's go to quarter past the hour. So it's Velma. Go ahead, Velma.
Thank you, Barry. I guess this is more of just I've understood from what little I know and what little I've learned through my practice of how important it is to discern and a teacher, because especially with Vajrayana, there seems to be a danger of a lot of ego-based teachers that I find it actually I feel a discomfort when I hear of like I said, that Rasputin kind of almost there seems to be a real danger in it, and it saddens me actually, because I think it skews somebody's opportunity to actually truly study and understand from a lineage perspective. So I don't really know what my question is, but it's just something that's sort of really sinking in a level of how important it is that we kind of tame our minds, and speaking from a very neurotic mind myself, tame my mind at this point in my life. So having had a connection to a lineage guru, I think is so important. I don't know. I'm just curious how do you like, not that I'm going to help people, but how do I don't know, how do we deal with these sort of crazy wisdom, almost ego-based people that seem to want to quote unquote teach people, but they really don't have that lineage to do so. I'm not sure if that makes any
Well,
sense.
I think so. First off, starting from the inside working out, each of us needs to make our own decisions and take care of ourselves, and never ever deviate from the mission of taming the mind, so that it's not to the, as the Mahayana slogan goes, that all Dharma agrees at one point, and that point of agreement is that all Dharma is about the lessening of ego and ultimately the eradication of ego. So the path doesn't work as some kind of a continual progression of, it's like, you think, okay, there's a kindergarten student, and here's a person with a PhD and an MBA and an MD and a doctor of laws, and they've progressed, and so they can't play with blocks. I mean, that's embarrassing. You need to, it doesn't work that way. There's a saying in the Vajrayana, as you ascend, so must you descend. So as there's more blossoming, roots have to go deeper, because ego is ready, willing, and able to exploit spirituality at any stage. And in terms of working with teachers, that you need to use your own bullshit detector, and that's all you've got. You don't have some kind of external confirmation telling you for sure one way or the other. You need to use your own detection system and relate to that and trust it.
Thank you. I personally feel very fortunate and humbled that I do have a connection to a lineage Vajra master, and it's humbling. It's not like, ooh, that's
Yeah.
something. It's
Well, and
and I feel like I have a heart connection. I'm more of I don't consider myself a real intellectual Buddhist. I wasn't. Yeah, so
sure.
I feel very fortunate.
Well,
And
Buddhism ultimately isn't intellectual. But just to conclude, because maybe we'll take another question, but there's a saying in the tradition that humbleness is the dwelling place of the ancestors. That's the ultimate, openness, humbleness. And we'll get into that as the course goes on. It comes up again. Thank you. Maybe one more, Ina.
Barry, there was a question in the chat which maybe you can address just quickly about doing sadhana on any other days, not only new moon and full moon. How about Guru Rinpoche days and Dakini days, or any other
that
day? For
kind
their
of
sake.
liturgical question is a bit beyond my scope, but I'll say this. You could write to the Nalanda Translation Committee maybe Tashi can address that question to Larry Mermelstein. The Vidyadhara is the person who chose those days as the days to practice the sadhana. It has been done on other days at times, but anyway, those are the days that have been chosen by the Vidyadhara, and nobody legislated a change. I don't know if it was practiced on another day. I don't know whether the sky would open up and lightning would strike, but I'm not that superstitious. But I'm just a good schoolboy. I do what I'm told. So,
all right. I think it's a time to wrap up. And Carlos, feel free to drop your question in the Facebook group, and we will do our best to address it. Make sure Harry will answer it later. And yeah.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for the time. See you next week.
Yes. Okay, I'm just gonna unmute everyone. And we can say bye. 1 second.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank
Thank you. Great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Good
Gracias.
night, good afternoon, good morning.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Good
You're
night.
welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.